Spotify has moved a long way in a short amount of time.
Yeah, their subscriber growth is pretty impressive. They came out earlier this year and said they've got 15 million subscribers now and 60 million active listeners. And if you look back even until May or so of 2014, those numbers were 10 million subscribers and 40 million active users. So that's about a 50% growth in just 7 months or so. So it should be no surprise now that they're coming out trying to raise more money, and in fact, seemingly quite on their way to doing so at a much higher valuation. Previously, they were valued at about $5 billion in 2014, late 2013. Now it's about $8.5 billion.
Well, and at a time when they're facing a lot more potential competition, right? I mean, Apple and Google getting into the game. Jay-Z has his own Tidal service, or one that he is working with a number of other artists on.
You hit it. That's the main question for Spotify. So what is the growth from now on when you throw in a bunch of these new competitors onto that? And also, is their path IPO, which is what a lot of people assume at this stage, particularly at an $8.5 billion valuation, or does it make more sense for them to sell to a large tech company? If Google, for instance, can't really get into the business of streaming music, does it make sense for Google to shell out $10, $14 billion to buy Spotify? We have heard over the years that, let's say the past 12 months or so, that Google and Spotify have had at least some preliminary conversations at the highest levels for M&A activity. Those seem to have sort of fallen off the table as Spotify just continues to get higher and higher valuations, similar to many other tech companies that are sort of going through the same path, Pinterest, et cetera.
You know, well, that leads to a lot of talk about bubbles, right, especially in companies that haven't gone public yet, and I guess that's a discussion for another time. But as far as Spotify is concerned, they still have issues, I guess the competition has them as well, with the labels, right? I mean, labels aren't happy with the amount of revenue they're getting from these streaming services.
Right, and we saw Taylor Swift, of course, she's the most notable one, pull her music off, and that, I imagine, will be a continuing problem, one of several problems, really, for Spotify as you look to future growth, competition being one, problems with labels being another one, how much you need to pay for rights to that music. It's a similar problem to Netflix, for instance, where Netflix has to have a continued increasing subscriber growth in order to pay for the increasing cost to put content on. Now, Netflix, of course, has the advantage of developing original content. Now, that's something that would be a lot more difficult, in theory, for Spotify to do.
Well,
it's just not their model. They could, I suppose, to start their own label or so forth, but that would be an iteration that we can't see down the road. So, yeah, a lot of questions for Spotify, and again, maybe that pushes them more in the M&A direction long term than it does, you know, to be a robust public company. That's probably not what they would say if you ask them.